Turn up the volume and grab your notebook. It's time to live life consciously. Welcome to Conscious Not Crazy. I'm Kori, your host, and a parent just like you. I'm here to share from my own experiences as a parent and educator to help you better understand the why behind your child's behavior and to provide you with tools to end all of the exhausting and unproductive power struggles. So feel proud you took the first step by tuning into this podcast. I hope this approach to parenting changes your life the way it changed mine. Welcome back to Conscious Not Crazy. I'm so excited to be here today, again with some amazing guests, the Unlikely Housewives, Tori, Shirah, and Tracy Stine. I'm so grateful to have them here, and they're going to tell us a little bit about their podcast and how they came to be. They're a faith-based podcast. Their goal is to bring hope, light, and humor to Christian motherhood and Christian marriage. And so from that, I'll let you guys take it from there. Tell us a little bit about how your podcast came to be and how it all started.
Well, thank you for having us, Kori. I so appreciate it. I'm Tori. And this podcast, I mean, it's been a labor of love. Would you agree with?
Yes,
would
absolutely.
You agree with that? So, Tracy.
Thank you, Kori, for having us on. We're so appreciative to be sharing in this podcast world and community with you.
Yes, very much so.
Thank you, guys.
So our podcast came out of COVID, and it really just started with a simple question of, oh, you feel that too? And it was us having conversations that we didn't hear other people having, and in spaces that we thought were quote unquote like safe to have those conversations. And so before we knew it, it was, I'm thinking of starting a podcast. And then somebody else said, hey, I could do it with you. And then here we are about to launch season 4.
Yeah, we were friends before. And when COVID hit, we just started really leaning into each other. We had the same beliefs and we weren't afraid to be around each other after about, the first 4 weeks. We were like, this is stupid. We're not playing this game anymore. Yeah. Let's hang out. So we would get the kids together. We would sit in her sauna and we would just really talk. And a lot of the conversations that we were having or seeing on social media and bringing to like our friend group and just different things, we were like, this needs to be on a verbal platform. We need to start using our voice beyond just a post here and there. And we wanted it to be something that was authentic and us. And so we did a little class, which was kind of really more for me, but I think it was really helpful for us to go through it together. It was Stephanie Gass. She does a podcast, and it was actually how to create your calling and figure out what you were looking for.
Yes.
And we both knew we wanted to do one. We both knew that we wanted to speak out on our beliefs, and we really wanted it to be foundationally set on our faith beliefs. And so we walked through that together. We spent a lot of time in prayer. We spent a lot of time coming up with topics and ideas. And once we got started finally, which Tori was like, thank you, Jesus, she takes forever.
One of us is more of a planner, which is not me. And one of us more is a fly by the seat of your pants. That's me.
And we have trained each other very well to be accommodating.
We have trained each other very well.
But in that, I think what came out of the beginning, I mean, this looks different from how we started. We're so different than how we started. Yeah. However, the foundation is the same. And I think that's what was really important. We don't steer away from being bold about our faith and belief in Jesus.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, strong foundation's always important. So it's great. It's great to have some planning, but I understand. I'm somewhere in the middle. Yeah, I think I'm somewhere in the middle. Fair. But I think it's great to just try something, do something that you've never done. So many people don't do that. My favorite quote is, don't give up better for perfect. So
I like that.
Yes, I like that.
I have it on my business cards. I literally was giving out my business cards when I started this, and I'm like, my website's not done, but don't give up better for perfect.
Yeah.
Yep. It's okay. Well, that's awesome. And you have a variety of topics and guests. So tell us a little bit about the different topics and the type of guests you have on. So the listeners, if they want to tune in.
Well, we kind of started with just us. Like we weren't going to, we didn't even really go into guest until, we were in the second half of our first season.
Yes, second half.
And that was when we really decided like, hey, we have a lot to give, but we know way too many people that have even more to give beyond us. And so we started bringing in topics on infertility and fostering kids to
women's hormones,
marriage, adultery, really a lot of parenting. In our most recent season, we had someone who lost their child to fentanyl. We've had 2 mothers who lost their children to suicide. We were talking about mental wellness. We've talked about a lot of different topics. Yeah.
I mean, and then we go into the stuff that we think is not that we think is boring, but we had a financial planner on to talk about like, okay, what's the scenario if you haven't been saving money for your kids to go off to college and now they're in high school and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to college.
And college isn't cheap.
No, exactly. So, and then like how to teach your kids to be financially. So there is a very large gamut of the kinds of guests. We also, based on issues that we both fully believe in, we had Seth Gruber, who's a pro-life activist, on as he was making his tour launch and documentary launch. And then we've also had
school board.
Yes, the school board. That was what.
Yeah, Moms for Liberty. Just different things that align with our beliefs and kind of more or less what's going on locally, but also challenging people to then tune into their local communities and find out what's going on in their schools. And obviously, there's most of the people who listen are mamas that have kids that are in some form or fashion in the education world. And so we also had a homeschooling mama. We've covered all kinds of things because we really do just want to bring awareness and education. And so that's kind of...
That's awesome. Yeah, and education's definitely a hot topic right now, for sure.
Yes.
There's been a lot of changes going on and even concerns about some of the things going on in public education. But I do a lot of parenting topics. And so how do you think, since you're a faith-based podcast, how personally do you think your faith has had a role in how you parent? And maybe when you're managing those not so fun behaviors, the challenging behaviors or the difficult behaviors, how has it helped you, supported you, and does it have an impact on that?
I mean, starting with faith is really, it has to begin there when you're parenting and when you're disciplining, especially for us. My husband and I, that's really where we go back to when we're having difficulty with our kids, whether it's their anxiety, whether it's their schoolwork, whether it's their friendship issues. And now that I have 2 in middle school, that's a whole different world. And even just the big things that we are facing with my high schooler. Like we have so many topics that we discuss, and ultimately we go back to, okay, obviously talk about it, but let's pray about it. Let's bring it to the Lord. Let's see what the word says. Let's see. We just always go back to it. And it takes a lot of practice because there's a lot of times where we try to go back to like, okay, well, this is how I was raised, or this is what I learned. And it wasn't always, prayer wasn't the first thing that I went to. And so we're really trying to teach our kids that, hey, when you are trying to figure out what to do with baseball or this test or this friendship, like you have to spend time with the Lord. Now that all 4 of my kids do walk with Jesus, it's so different because we can guide them and we're supporting them, but they also have to play a role in that too and listen and learn what it may look like to pray and kind of make some decisions on their own.
When you say now that all 4 of your kids walk with Jesus, does that for you as a family, that means all 4 have been baptized? Or just
yes.
Adequate. Okay. Yes. That they made that proclamation.
Yes.
I was going to say, I think a huge part of parenting is modeling the behavior you want for your kids. It's more important than what we say. And it sounds to me like that's a huge part of what you're doing. And the most important part is how they see you face challenges or obstacles and how you handle them. And if you're praying about it and if you're seeking Jesus first, then they're going to be inclined to do the same.
Well, I'm going to go back to your quote, better, not perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Trying for better, not perfect.
It's just like our cell phone. Yeah. We know the kids are on them too much. So when there's times I'm on it too much and I'm telling them not to have it at the table, and then I might be standing there with it because of something going on. I'm like, kids, I tell them to call me out, and they do. Mm-hmm. The other night, my daughter took my phone from me, and I was very happy. I'm like, that's awesome. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And because if I'm going to hold them accountable, I want them to hold me accountable, because we do sometimes get out of consciousness as to what we're doing. We get overwhelmed with all the daily tasks. So,
yeah. Well, I was just saying, like, the best encouragement that I remind myself is that even the perfect parent, aka God, children screwed up. And that's because we live in a fallen world. So, like, you can be the perfect parent and still not get perfect kids. And that is something that reminds me that like, I'm not going to get it right all the time as a parent. They're not going to get it right all the time as a kid, but there is still grace and compassion and mercy for those moments. But also, God loves us in such a way that he disciplines us. And so teaching there are consequences, good or bad, to our actions and our decisions. That's the season that we're currently in with our girls. And it's a matter of just showing them like, okay, yes, you can absolutely not practice at home, but is the coach going to want you to be on the field if you're not throwing strikes? Things like that. And I would say like the Stine family is so fantastic at worshiping together and doing their family meetings and really modeling that. Our family has room to grow. Our girls go to a Heritage Christian Academy. And so we're very fortunate that they get that kind of education, but it's not the school's job and it's not the church's job to disciple our children. It's ours. So there's always room for improvement.
Always. Yeah. There is no there is no perfect when it comes to us humans, right? So we have to have grace for ourselves. I think parents get overwhelmed. They feel bad. They get stuck in that trap or that cycle of guilt and shame. And that doesn't serve anyone. And I tell my kids the same thing when my kids say negative things about their behavior or their attitude, like their limiting beliefs. I'm like, well, whatever you believe will be true. So is that going to help you achieve your goal or not? So just asking them those reflective questions. But to your point on the kid piece, I think a lot of parents too think their kids' behavior, they take it personal. They see they're worried about people judging them based on what their kids do. I think that's a huge problem. And so therefore they get too involved and tend to micromanage or try to control the dynamics of, you speak to middle school friendships. Yeah, I have a middle schooler too, so I completely understand. And I'm a big advocate for letting the kids figure it out. And we as parents are supposed to model and coach them at home on how to navigate those challenges based on what we value. And it might not be the same as what they value, and that's okay. It's okay to be different. But I do an activity with a lot of my families and my courses where I have them actually identify values. I think, and I don't know if you guys would agree or disagree, that a lot of families are kind of flying blind out there. They don't really dial in on what do they value. And you really have to have, it's all about foundation. If it's built on sand, it's going to be tough. It's going to be challenging. You're going to get stuck in these cycles. Whereas if you have that strong value-based foundation, whether it's faith-based or not, it doesn't necessarily have to be depending upon their beliefs or the family's beliefs, but having some base of what does our family value. And I love doing an activity where the kids get values, like just a worksheet with a list of values to give them some ideas. And then the parents get it and they circle them. And then come together as a group and really dial in on, okay, what are the 5 or 6 or whatever, however many, whatever the number is that we agree on as a family. So, but I love that.
We did that at the beginning of the year. So we had Joe and Melanie from the Strong Family podcast, and they really focus on creating values and like kind of your family mission statement.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to just do. And I love that you encourage that too, because it is something that we're a family, but we're so individualistic in our family. Everybody is so unique. And as they're getting older, they're even more different. And it's getting a lot harder. And so like having that family foundation and those values really still keeps us in line.
Right. No, absolutely. So, everybody needs them. And it's just taking the time. I think time is precious, right? We can't get time back. So it's thinking about if we value our time, which I would say the majority of people, that would probably fall on their values. And often I hear, well, I don't have time for that. Maybe it's working out. Maybe it's praying. Maybe it's meditation. Maybe it's whatever it is. But if you value it, then it's your choice and your responsibility to make that a priority and make time for that, because we all have 24 hours in the day. So we all have the same amount of time. So I think that's awesome that you guys do that. Okay, so tell me, we were talking about schools. I know you both chose to send your kids to private schools. One is a faith-based education and one is not, just a non-traditional, more like what my kids went to. My kids have done both. They've done the non-traditional through 5th grade and then faith-based now, middle school and high school. So tell me what led you to that decision.
So my background, because I'm from Dallas originally.
Okay.
And so when my husband and I moved here, what do you do when you're looking for a house and you have young kids? You're looking at school districts.
Right.
And when you look online, all you see is the public school Blue Valley, and it's exemplary, and this is all of our accomplishments, and this is all of our recognition. And so when I told him my requirements for a house, I said, I want to be in the Blue Valley School District. Like, based on what I saw online, I want to be in the Blue Valley School District. And so our girls were preschool at that time when we moved up here. And just so happened the year before our oldest went into kindergarten, we were looking for something more structured. So we switched to preschool, and it just happened to be at Heritage Christian. And I could tell through 3 weeks in, I was like, oh boy, this is something I want. Love my husband. And so I very lovingly asked him, like, hey, so what if we considered like sending them to this private Christian school? And his response in a very loving way was, what the hell?
Right.
Like, that was one of the requirements you had. They had to be in Blue Valley. They had to be in Blue Valley. Like, we could have lived far out. Like, he's the person that is always looking at the houses just to look, right? And he wants land. And so, yes. And he's like, but you told me Blue Valley. There's no way. Like, we're paying for these public school taxes. We're going to Blue Valley. And I was like, okay, just think about it. Just pray about it. And so he went to a Dads with Donuts event at the preschool, and he started to talk to them, the other fathers. And like, a lot of them had kids in the upper school and elementary school. And they said, hands down, best decision we ever made. Yeah. And not just because of the faith aspect, but like the community, smaller classes. There was a lot of benefit, like academically further ahead. And that one, so he was like, okay, I can wrap my head around this. And at first it was very much like, okay, maybe we just do the first couple of years. Maybe it's just and then we'll, at middle school.
Stages,
yeah. And now it's very much like we've planned tuition.
It's through high school, right?
Yeah. All the way through 12.
That's so funny you said that, because we're not from here, but we've lived here. I've lived here, 18, 19 years. And when we were buying our first house, I was like, it has to be in Blue Valley. Mm-hmm. And our kids went to a preschool in Missouri.
Yeah.
So my kids went to Bambini Create TV, which is in Martin City. And I wasn't from here. So I'm like, Missouri, that's so far. Well, I laugh because I live on State Line
right,
Road
exactly.
Right now. And I'm like, Missouri is across the street. My car tells me 20 times a day, welcome to Kansas. Welcome to Missouri, because I'm crossing the street. But yeah, we had a similar experience. We walked into a school. It kind of became our home. And at the time, Bambini was just a preschool. And a lot of people still think it is, and partially because of the name. But the Think School's the elementary, and we got into that school and it just felt right. And I was nervous. I second guessed myself a few times, like we were the first, but I told Brianne, the owner and principal of the school, I said, we're not leaving, so you're just going to have to keep rolling up. So it rolled up. My kids were the first ones to go through 5th grade. It just goes to 5th now. So my daughter was there 9 years. My son was there 7. So she was 2, he was 4. So he was the first 5th grader. And then she was the first kid to start in the preschool and go all the way through. And some years, the class size, like you said, smaller class sizes. For me, it was more the autonomous atmosphere. The kids it really built their self-confidence. They did a lot of public speaking at a very young age. I taught there 6 years, so I got to see firsthand just the difference. And I learned so much about child development because I worked with the 2-year-olds and rolled even with the same kids year after year. Mm-hmm. But it was just a very unique, playful. I think we were talking about the book, The Anxious Generation. Yeah. The end of that book, all he talks about is what needs to change in education, that schools need to become more playful. Kids need more time to play. Kids need more autonomy. Kids need opportunities to get heard. And we need to put more trust into them because they're much more capable than we give them credit for. And that's just been a gradual change over time. When I was a kid, we'd go out in the morning and come back at dark. Our parents we didn't have cell phones. They had no idea where we were.
No idea where we were. However, all of the neighbors were under strict rule. Like, if you see the Pope kid,
right?
Like, you are fully allowed to beat her if she is doing something wrong. Like, but
the parents, it was a community of support.
It was a community of support. And I was fully aware that there were other parents' eyes on me, and that if I did something that my parents would probably know before I got home.
100%. He talks about that too in the book, because he talks about how now parents are more fearful that if they give their child that space, they let their child at 8 years old walk to the store or to the park alone, somebody is going to turn them in for child endangerment or something like that.
True, though. I mean, the society has created us to be more fearful. I mean, that's what the media's done. I mean, especially these last 4 years. I mean, it's just fear mongering everywhere.
Like, I'm not more fearful that somebody would call me in for child neglect or endangerment, but I mean, like, how quickly someone can grab a kid off the street. That is my fear of, like, my girl's getting abducted. That is just something that I do. That is my own.
And I think
thing.
It's what, to your point of, we're just more exposed to it because of, we're inundated with social media, the news. There's no positive news. All the news is negative.
Right.
My dad one time said they should just have a positive news station. It's just all positive. I don't watch TV anymore because I want to really be mindful and intentional about what I allow in to help me manage that fear. Because I was a parent that did let my kid walk some places, and I questioned myself because not everybody was doing that. But after reading that and the science behind it, why it's important, I am grateful that I did. And I think I did it. I will attribute more of why I did that earlier on was because of Bambini, because there was so much autonomy in that environment, and I saw the benefits of it. Now, we were still careful, and they were in a safe place.
Yes, you're not having them walk 5 miles to the grocery store.
And I talked to my kids about be safe, and I would always tell them when I travel with them, they used to have those like gizmo watches. I'm like, if somebody takes you, hide the watch. I would say that not to scare them. You don't want to scare your kids, but if something happens, I can find you that way. And again, and they were a little bit older. You don't want to scare kids, but it's very interesting. But just that playful environment. I'm a fan, obviously, of non-traditional education and child-based learning. When kids learn when they're playing, they retain the knowledge so much more. And they remember it. But that's also when they acquire these skills. They get to try on practicing the family values. If I hit somebody, that might not go well. They have to have exposure to experiences without adult supervision sometimes. So I think it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I have 4 kids, and my older 3 are still in public, and my youngest is in private, and this will be her second year there. In our school, it's called Freedom Learning Academy. It's a small micro school that started out of 2020, and it was a teacher who pulled us kids out of the school, didn't like the way the schools were headed, and it's really awesome. I mean, essentially, it is the parents have so much say in their child's education and the involvement, and it's very play-based, like you said, like, they have 2 recesses, very long, out in nature, playing in the creek. Like, there's just so many hands-on activities. The day of the birthday, they get to bake their own cake in the kitchen.
They did that at Bambini, too.
Yep, they get to do that and celebrate, and all the parties, all families involved. Every Friday, there's a field trip that parents all sign up for and go on whichever they want. And the kids, they get even better of an education, in my opinion, because they are in... It's kind of Montessori style. So it's last year she was in a 3rd through 5th. This year she'll be in a 4th through 6th. It's just kind of based on the size of the class.
Yeah.
But she went in low in a couple areas because she really struggled in the public schools. She just, 1, has anxiety, and 2, the class sizes were enormous. And she just needed smaller, hands-on, play-based. And she literally went from just barely surviving to thriving at this school. And it is because of all those different opportunities to learn. And so she went from like low in a couple areas to like well above her grade. As we were talking about it this week, she was writing, and her handwriting is so good for a 4th grader compared to like even my middle schoolers and high schooler.
Right.
Like, it's insane how well, because she obviously pencil paper. She's not on an iPad.
Right.
She's done everything by hand. And I homeschooled her for kindergarten. So she's had a lot of like at home learning and then the private school. So it's just the path that we chose for her because we knew that's what she needed, and we love it. The other kids, they're still where they are because they kind of have a little bit of say, and they're doing well. We said the minute that it doesn't go well, or the minute that we start to have more battles than we have success, those kinds of things, we'll have a new conversation.
And I think in a traditional education environment, especially as they get older, they learn different skills, right? They're learning, yes, the world is not going to conform to what I want or what I need, because I know my kid's dad would always question, like, well, this isn't real world when he was talking about being a beauty. And I'm like, but they learned a lot of real world skills. They learned how to negotiate, how to advocate for themselves, really important skills that I'm seeing transfer into traditional education. Because if something comes up with a teacher, they're not afraid to politely question it, not in a rude manner, but they're not afraid to speak up and advocate or come home and share it with me. We talk through how to advocate for themselves. Because I think traditional education puts everybody in a box, right? The teachers want the kids to conform to what's easy for them. Instead of adapting and understanding, we all don't learn the same way. We all don't take in information the same way. So it's awesome to find environments where the learning can happen a lot of different ways to meet the needs of a lot of different kids, because there's so much ADHD and attention and a lot of kids that are medicated, and it's nothing against medication. I have a kid that struggles with attention. I myself struggle with attention at times, but a lot of that could improve just by changing the environment. Kids, I mean, I don't think a lot of adults could sit at a desk and do independent work without talking to other people all day long. That would be hard. I mean, if you go to a work conference, there's a lot of breaks for a reason. It's hard to just sit there. So that's awesome. Well, thank you. Okay, so is there anything else you would like that you can think of that's been helpful from your faith from a personal perspective, like as far as helped you as a parent with coping with your own frustrations?
For me, this past year, couple of years, God has I've really leaned into my personal relationship with God. And that to me has been really important, because there have been some situations and scenarios that have been exclusively for me, and where I hear God's voice and this is what I want you to do, and nobody else around me hears that same vision, that same wording. And so there have been a lot of times that I am challenged and saying, okay, well, no, I really do believe that God is calling me to do this. It's made me a stronger believer. It has also made me question believers in general and be more, not like question, like judging, but like coming back to the root of like, how deep is your faith? And your faith isn't just reading your Bible and doing a devotional. Your faith is you're walking it out. It has to come out like what people think that they can do. Like, oh yeah, I have faith. And I'm like,
because I went to Mass every Sunday. So like going to Mass every Sunday, but then coming home and talking negatively about people would not be living your faith.
Right. Or just the thing of like, oh, well, if I need to step away from this and do this inherently risky idea, and people going, you can't do that. I'm like, well, yeah, I can. And that's actually what I'm called to do. Well, God gave you a brain. Yes. But also he asked me to get in the wheelbarrow, and that I have to do, like, I'm going to do what God's called me to do, even if he tells us multiple times it's a narrow path. Like he says that. And like, I have called you, I have anointed you. And that's individually, not, he didn't say all y'all. Like,
now you sound like you're from Kentucky.
So it's just, that has been something that I hope that my girls see, where I have conversations and disagreements with people and individuals in our circles and communities, where I say, good for you. That's not what I'm doing.
Right. I think that takes a lot of courage and strength to follow that path, because I think too many people are focused. I mean, we need money to live, right? But when you follow your purpose or what God has called you to do, it feels different. You're not going to quit, and things just work out. It's just, you have to, I tattooed it on my arm, faith over fear. It's like, you have to have enough faith and just trust the process. Because even myself, like doing what I do now, Conscious Not Crazy has been around for, I think, over a decade. So 11, 12 years now. And I would pay for the domain name year after year. Like, I don't know what this is going to be, but it's going to be something. I just knew. But then I'm like, this is stupid. Like, then my limiting beliefs, this is stupid. Why am I still paying for this? I've done nothing with the website. And now I have a website. So it's just, you just got to trust it. And it took me clearing some things out of my life.
Pruning.
And, to be able to follow that calling and that purpose. And it feels really good when you do. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are just haven't found that purpose yet.
Yeah. And
they wouldn't understand.
Right. And I also think that there are a lot of people who are comfortable.
Yeah.
It's very easy to be
complacent.
And yes, and complacent in that and going, well, yes, of course, this is I am supposed to have a 9-to-5 job. I'm supposed to do this. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes he's very clear on where he's trying to get you out of or into, and you can only deny him for so long. I mean, the consequences, usually if you obey the first time, great, good. The longer you disobey, the harder it is because he's going to get you to where you need to be. It's just
how many obstacles do you want to overcome?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So,
yeah, because if you don't figure it out, the way I say it is if you don't figure out the first time, it'll just keep you putting in front of you over and over until you do.
That's very true.
So awesome. Well, thank you, Tracy. Do you have anything you want to add?
She's very on point with just the whole listening and discernment and just trying to follow your calling. And I think when we started this 2.5 years ago, we knew that this was God driven because neither of us were really like, hey, let's jump, but let's obey and see where this takes us. And he's continued to just do incredible things with it, put it in front of many listeners. We've met so many incredible guests. And we get these random texts like I just recently got last week, haven't heard from you in a few months. Is the podcast coming back? Yes, we are. She's like, well, school started and it was my go-to thing for listening when we were driving to school. I'm like, oh, well, that's awesome. It's just, we know it's for his good. And we hope that everything that we talk about and share just brings him glory.
Awesome. Well, I love it. Well, thank you guys so much. So tell the listeners how to find you if they want to tune into your podcast.
We are on all major podcast platforms, and you can search for us as the Unlikely Housewives. We also have an Instagram, Unlikely Housewives, and we have a Facebook page that you can search for as the Unlikely Housewives podcast.
Awesome. And I will make sure the website is in the show note.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for your time.
Thank you, Kori. I appreciate it.
I'm so grateful. Thanks so much for tuning in to Conscious Not Crazy. I hope you're finding comfort in knowing you are not alone. Parenting is hard and the struggle is real. I am forever grateful for this amazing community of like-minded parents striving to simply do better than yesterday. Until next time, keep on living life consciously. I can't wait to connect with you again soon. Be sure to follow me on Facebook and visit my website, consciousnotcrazy.com. All the details can be found in the show notes. Now go get back to the never-ending, exhausting, and yet most fulfilling job you'll ever do.